the Agile brand.
Welcome, everybody. This is Paul Foley, and you're listening to Bulk Exchanges, where we explore the human stories behind heavy civil construction and technology. Along with my co-host, Rachel Mahoney, we will be introducing guests from all areas of our trillion-dollar industry, from the legends that shaped modern infrastructure to the next generation who will revolutionize it. We will discuss ideas, opportunities, and strategies for what's next. All right. We are back at it here at Bulk Exchanges. I hope everyone out there is doing really well. I have my co-host Rachel Mahoney with me here. Hello, Rachel.
Hey, Paul. Good to be back on another episode, and welcome to our listeners. As you know, in our discussions before we record today, I'm excited to talk to our guests specifically because my background coming more from technology. I'm always fascinated to learn about the different ways that folks are bringing new solutions to the industry, and specifically, our guest is also focuses on strategy as a founder. So, he and I have that in common. And so, very much looking forward to the conversation and introducing our listeners to him.
Yeah, absolutely. We always said we would cast a wide net of topics and guests related to this industry. So here we are today with the founder of Sensera Systems, Mr. David Gaw. David, you are very welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Happy to be here.
Good. Well, David, as a contractor and developer back in the old days, sometimes site surveillance meant a couple of German shepherds as guard dogs to protect against equipment and tools being stolen.
Mm-hmm.
Like so much in this modern world that has evolved so significantly, it means so much more. Site safety, efficiencies, data analytics that we're going to really dive into on this show. Can you share with our listeners here some of the nuances that makes Sensera Systems so compelling? Just would you mind giving us some background on your company there?
Yeah, well, I founded the company really coming at it from an IoT perspective on how can we apply technology onto job sites to improve outcomes. And as you point out, the technology has come a long way, and we like to think we've been a big part of doing that. And Sensera is focused today on providing solutions for project teams to improve outcomes generally. And we can go into those details, but that's what we do. We do it with a combination of hardware and software that's seamlessly integrated and gives teams, more tools. And as you said, you don't need to rely on guard dogs anymore. You can have cameras monitoring 24/7 and letting your team know only when there's an issue. So management by exception.
That's awesome. And for our listeners, David, would you just describe IoT and what that means specifically to what you guys are doing?
Well, I mean, it essentially means applying devices, in our case, cameras in the field and other sensors that allow us to monitor activity on a job site so we can inform project teams essentially what's happening in real time. So that's what we mean.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for that. So, like you said, David, Sensera has been a leader in providing innovative solutions for construction site monitoring. From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges facing construction project management today, and how is Sensera addressing those challenges to shape the industry's future?
Right. Yeah. I mean, no surprise to you coming from the industry, but at the highest level, it's really on time and on budget. That's the challenge, as you know.
Yeah.
Most projects don't make that actually. So it's a challenge, and that's at the highest level. But we focus on a few areas: safety, security, and then supporting the project teams, kind of day to day and minute to minute in making the project run. And so I think those are key challenges, and by applying technology, we can beat down safety, security, and and keeping teams efficient, which are big contributors to that on time, on budget objective. As you know, construction's pretty dangerous, can be a dangerous place. 1 out of 5 workplace deaths happen on job sites. There are also financial impacts of unsafe work practices, theft and crime. Single incidents, you can lose a lot of money in terms of materials from a theft incident, but just as importantly, sometimes more, you can have lost time in the lead time needed to replace that material or correct the vandalism. So, theft and vandalism is a big driver. And we apply our technology solutions to help project teams manage those risks.
That's great. One of the questions that I had for you that we deal with bulk exchange when we are talking to customers about innovative solutions
Mhm.
is how you get that information back to them in a way that really resonates. I mean, in your case, obviously there might be some tangible or, observable things in the day to day,
Mhm.
given what you do. But if you wouldn't mind just kind of telling how you quantify those benefits back to them, is it part tangible, like I said, on observable, and then is there a data strategy or an analytics strategy that you help tell the message of the benefits they're receiving?
Yeah, I think that's Rachel. That's a good question. In the case of visual monitoring, which is kind of a core piece of how we do what we do, there is a direct benefit of literally seeing what's happening on the site all the time, 24/7 in real time. So, our customers see benefit from that alone. But from there, we've been sort of building up the stack, if you will, to sort of filter, process, analyze that information on behalf of the project teams to extract what they need to know. And that extracting what they need to know varies by use case, right? In the case of site security, that can mean watching for an intrusion incident after hours. The system knows what the working hours are on the site, and now any activity that's on the site or in a certain area of the site can be considered an intrusion or a problem and flag that. So that's an example of how you go from sort of raw data, imagery, monitoring the site to actionable information to the user for the use case of site security, right? And for safety, it's a little bit different. For safety, that might be setting up the system so that it can watch for workers on site not wearing PPE and letting the team know about that, or even trending how often that's happening. And so it looks a little bit different for each kind of use case, but the general structure of what's going on is we're collecting rich data from the site, visual information, sort of the whole site 24/7, and then sort of watching that on behalf of the project team to let them know what they need to know.
Awesome. Yeah. And with, you touched on IoT there a few minutes ago, David. With Sensera's emphasis on advanced IoT and cloud technologies, how have you
Mhm.
seen these tools transform the efficiencies and safety and communication on job sites? Can you share, and you were touching on some real world examples there, but could you share some other real world example of a project where these solutions made a measurable difference?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the at the heart of our solution, it's all the pieces, the hardware, software, services to provide that kind of job site intelligence, as we call it, or smart monitoring on the
Right.
site. We work with a pretty wide range of GCs. So we support today over 2,000 GCs across North America. They're all shapes and sizes, from the largest ones, Turner, Skanska, PCL, Clayco, all the way
Right.
down to small regional guys. And obviously the needs vary quite a bit depending on the type of project mostly, but also the type of GC and how they work and how they operate. And so Donlinger Construction is a good example of a case study where they were looking to cut down some of the interaction between the project teams and the superintendents. And it seems like a pretty small, minor thing, but if you add it up, extra phone calls, extra walk to the trailer, those things can really add up over a site, and they represent really opportunity costs for that team member to be doing something more valuable. And so Donlinger deployed our solutions, and we're able to really reduce the need for the project team to constantly check on with superintendents on everything from whether some subcontractors were in the right place at the right time, checking on daily productivity, safety compliance. So again, overall, we're providing them the ability to see what is and has transpired to really increase the scale at which they can use visual data to document and validate and and keep the teams in sync. That's really the overarching value. That's one of the overarching values. There is keeping teams in sync efficiently.
Yeah, like in this entire industry, we're all having to do more with less, and
Yep.
I really like what you're highlighting there, because how can we make less folks more efficient? So everything you're touching on there, I could even me as a smaller contractor, I can totally resonate with. So
Yeah.
I want to touch on sustainability here. It's becoming a growing focus across industries, including construction. How is Sensera Systems contributing to environmentally responsible practices? And what role does technology play in achieving these goals, David?
Well, I think in our case, this is a minor but important piece. Our solution is really a very low footprint, requires a very low footprint on the site. Right? It's compact, solar, wireless. It can be deployed without any infrastructure, so you have the savings of not having to trench and pull power, which uses resources. So that's a fundamental piece in terms of our providing a kind of a low footprint but very powerful solution for the site. But then at a functional level, if you think about what we're doing to support project teams to build better, it's really making them more efficient, and that can lead directly to reduced waste. Right. So
Absolutely, yeah.
one of the use cases we support is really trying to avoid rework, right? If I can catch an issue early, then I avoid having to undo that, or I'd avoid extra effort to undo that, right? The earlier I can catch it, the less rework there is. And rework at the end of the day is wasted time, of course, but it's also wasted materials, right? I have to rip something out and do it again. So those things both impact, we think, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. Because most of my background is heavy civil construction, a lot of underground. So you're putting pipe utilities underground, and
mhm,
if something is not spotted for one reason or another, and
mhm,
it gets installed in the ground and backfilled and covered over, like it can be just a huge cost and absolutely huge environmental aspect, because it's just a waste if you're putting something in and ripping it out. So I once again, I can totally see the real world examples of what you're
exactly.
discussing there.
I had a question for you as well, David. Can you tell us, so once you get a yes from a contractor, what is the time scale to implement from a yes to a go on your end?
It can be as short as a few days, right? So one of the core kind of values of our solution over others is how simple and easy it is to deploy. So the infrastructure, the lack of any requirement for infrastructure that I mentioned is an example, right? If I have to pull power or internet, I've got a long delay due to make ready to deploy the hardware on the site. We don't have that. You can be up and running in a matter of minutes, hours on the site. And then in terms of the team engaging with SiteCloud, our software system, we make that available, from any browser. We have mobile apps, so it's very easy to deploy that across the team and be up and running. So it'd be very fast to deploy the system.
Yeah, I appreciate you highlighting that because one of the things that I'm sure you've experienced, as have we, is that there's a lot of legacy systems in and
Yep.
around this industry, and they're very convoluted. Many
Yep.
are on premise or require such integration complexity that there's a huge risk to their existing stack or security, as well as just that lag time to get it up and running. So, in looking at Sensera and what you're doing, I thought that that was something that was particularly compelling. So appreciate that. And, sort of a segue for me that I find fascinating about you, the person, more so than the company or technology speak, because I think you and I have this in common, which is
Mhm,
there's something really intriguing to me about a founder who chooses to act in strategy versus
mhm,
just the traditional CEO as they do.
mhm,
And so if you wouldn't mind just telling me, why you choose that as your role, because I think it's so fascinating. I know personally, I've been in the same boat where I've been a founder, co-founder, and I've chosen strategy for the last 20 years. I like how I can
mhm.
touch in all aspects of the business and kind of stay in that think cloud to help direct, where we go, and I just find that so fascinating for your background. I'd love to hear a little more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of approached, yeah, particularly the earlier phases of building a business. As a founder, I think for me anyway, the main guide is, what does the company need? And where can you have the highest unique impact? And so, I've done different roles at different times. Yeah, I was done the CEO role for 20 years, but my love and where I think my highest value add for the company is around product. So as we've grown the business, we've all been able to take more specialized roles. That's kind of where I've gravitated. I think product is we consider ourselves a product led company, and so it's that's where the rubber meets the road with your customers, and getting it right is important, and I happen to like doing it. So that's kind of what led me there.
That's awesome. And you just touched on it a little bit, but I want to focus. It sounds like you do both intrinsic strategy within the company as well as your extrinsic strategy and how you grow.
Mhm,
I'd love to hear more on what your thoughts are for the next few years. We know that there's some enormous outside pressures from consolidation to just higher demand
mhm,
that we're going to need to be more efficient, to be more innovative in how we approach things.
mhm.
Will you talk a little bit about what you see for the industry strategically and how Sensera is preparing for that?
Yeah, so I guess two levels. I mean, our view of the construction industry is that it's really in a phase of generally technology adoption. So looking at where and how different IT solutions can improve outcomes in construction. That's where the industry is, and we're along that journey. And it's in many ways, and pieces of it are following pretty, I think, well understood patterns in terms of technology adoption and early adopters and middle and late adopters and all of that. And so that's how we view kind of the state of play in the industry. And so our job is to deliver those solutions, but understand that that's the journey that our customers are on. So making sure that we're solving the right problems as they continue to understand how they want to apply technology and how the top problems are evolving for them. And so we want to be able to keep up with that. And so this gets to the company level. We bootstrapped the company for the first number of years of the business, and then a couple years ago, we took on additional capital. And the reason we did that is to continue to accelerate our growth, to keep up with what we think the opportunity is, what customers are asking us to do, and make sure that we're not any sort of a bottleneck in getting the most to our customers.
No, I love that, the way that you phrase that. It's absolutely something we see every day here, which is, generationally technology resistant.
Mhm,
But in the last few years, and especially going into the next, you're exactly right. There's a huge both curiosity, need, and emphasis on technology adoption in a way that hasn't been seen before.
mhm.
And so I think that you're exactly correct in how you're preparing for that. So that's exciting to see. And, as we follow along to how you execute that, I think there's a lot that can be learned for all of us who are trying to make an impact, for sure.
Would you say, David, that, with everything that happened with COVID, folks moving off site, something I've noticed on job sites now is, even inspectors like city or county government inspectors, building inspectors coming to a site, the use of like drones to carry out inspections, or there's so much virtual. Can you describe how the events over the last 4 or 5 years may have accelerated a lot, which ties into your world?
Well, I think it showed all of us in general as consumers and all the industries, what's possible and what's not in terms of working remote and what you can and can't do remote, and what's the state of readiness of the tools for doing that. I think that's what it showed us. And in construction, that means that I think, like other industries, the construction industry understood, yeah, there are things that these remote tools are they're good and they're powerful and they can help us in a lot of ways, right? And so I think it was an accelerant in that way, the sort of COVID event of exposure, and it probably helped some of us delivering those solutions get the word out. But at the end of the day, the industry has to embrace and adopt this technology, and that's a complex process. It has to
Mhm.
adapt
Yeah.
to each GC's build processes, which, as you know, vary quite a lot. And they have to, and then the human parts, they have to understand it, they have to trust it, and they have to believe in the ROI of it, right? So all those things have to be true. So I think we're seeing that, and COVID was an accelerator, I think, in terms of awareness and understanding. And now we continue to kind of work through that adoption curve, if you will.
That's awesome. David, something that's really important to Paul and I, and would love your thoughts on it, is the features or the personality trait that we both recognize in one another and a lot of folks that we work with, whether it's within the company or outside of it. And I think it's at the heart of what drives this industry in particular, and that's grit.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's a word that's thrown around a lot, it means different things to different folks. But again, when you see that in someone, that trait, we tend to get really extraordinary results. And I'd love
Mhm.
your thoughts on what that is and what that means to you, and if in fact you also look for and recognize that in the folks that you work with, whether it's inside of Sensera or in your customers or those that you feel like
Mhm.
you really, collaborate well with.
Yeah, I do, and I guess my understanding of grit is really about approach and how you overcome obstacles or react to obstacles, and that sort of thing. And I think, I mean, there's at least two dimensions in my mind to that. One is having a clear enough understanding of what you're, in the case of building a company, what you're building and why, right? Because obstacles become harder if you don't really know what your kind of north star is you're trying to get around the obstacle to achieve, right? So really knowing, picking a good target, knowing what and why you're building. And then another piece of it is understanding the sort of the core drivers. So if you're going to, if your mission is to solve a particular set of problems, do you really understand the core drivers of those, and the core end requirements? Because maybe the first way you chose to solve those didn't work or ran into a roadblock. But if you really have a deep understanding of what problem you're trying to solve, then it's easier to pivot to solution B, right? Is one. So those would be a couple of the things, and the entrepreneurial thing in general, I think, is not always appreciated, but you are always playing against the clock, and that may seem like a truism to some, but it's there's no getting around that.
Well, I think you touched on something that's really important, and when I think of grit, it's exactly that, which is the resilience required, in my case, to be a constructive failure. And
Hmm.
then to your point, keep the eye on the North Star so that you
Hmm.
don't, whatever setback or step back is happening in the moment, you still clearly see where you're going and you can adjust and ante up again. And to your point, I
Hmm.
I think that's something that is imperative to being an entrepreneur, but also something in the industry. I think you touched on it again in your first question. This is an industry that has a ton of complexity. There's all kinds of things that impact timeliness and safety and all of these aspects. Some you can plan for, some you can't. So the ability to adjust where needed and not get disheartened by it and get back up and do it again,
Yeah.
I think is extraordinary.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I mean, earlier, we talked about this a little bit, but, in this whole area of grit and entrepreneurship, I think of this was kind of a rule. It's a very common rule in software development of design big, implement small. But as you know, if you're trying to solve a big problem, you say, to make a relevant company, you want to solve a big problem. But if you sort of go for too big of a solution all at once, I think it's hard to make that successful. So I think following the software rule of design big, you have a big vision and you're going after solving a big chunk of some problems, but it's all about how you break that down into steps that you can get to and manage.
Well, wise words from a man that has walked the walk. So yeah, really, really appreciate all that. And David, everything you've been describing is fascinating and is simply here to stay and will continue to evolve, especially with a company like Sensera leading the charge. So, from Rachel and I, both of us want to thank you very much for coming on Bulk Exchanges today, and we wish you well. So, thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul, Rachel. Good discussion. Appreciate it.
On behalf of myself and Rachel, we want to thank our guests and listeners for joining us on another episode of Bulk Exchanges, where industry meets infrastructure and shapes great conversations. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and also find us at bulkexchange.com and on socials at Bulk Exchange. And remember, until next time, keep building, listening, and learning.
The Agile brand.